Good evening and welcome to the fourth event of the Executive Speakers Series presented by the Farmer School of Business in partnership with Miami University's Alumni Association. My name is Megan Langhouse and I will be the moderator for the event this evening. Two reminders for all of our viewers and our students watching tonight. You have the option to ask a question throughout the presentation by clicking on the Ask a Question button located directly below the video screen. I'll be posing a number of those questions to Nina Leigh during the live Q&A toward the end of the event. If you're a student watching for a class assignment or class credit, we will be gathering student attendance during the Q&A portion of the event. You'll be prompted to enter your first and last name, email, and the class you are attending for in the Ask a Question button. Pay attention to when the banner flashes at the bottom of the screen requesting that information. I'd like to turn the event over now to Dean of the Farmer School of Business, Jenny Derrick.
Well, welcome to the fourth event of our Executive Speakers Series. I'm delighted that you could join us this evening. As you know, I'm Jenny Derrick and I'm the Dean of the Farmer School. The title of tonight's talk is A Career in the Pet Care Industry, a conversation with Nina Leigh Krueger, Purina's new CEO and President. Before we get started, I would like to give you a brief snapshot of Nina Leigh's outstanding career. First and foremost, Nina Leigh Krueger is one of us. She graduated with a BS in marketing in 1983. I probably shouldn't have put the year in there, Nina Leigh.
Thanks.
Yeah. Nina Leigh Krueger is currently Chief Executive Officer and President for Nestle Purina, PetCare company in the United States. Nina Leigh began her career at Purina in 1994 in the cat food marketing division. She went on to hold various positions of increasing responsibility within the company, working on key global brands and initiatives, and has been instrumental in bringing innovation to the market. In 2010, Nina Leigh was named Vice President of Purina's litter division, and in 2015, Nina Leigh was named Chief Marketing Officer. She earned the role of President in 2016 and transitioned to the role of CEO and President of the PetCare business in January 2021. As I mentioned earlier, Nina Leigh is a graduate of Miami University, but in addition to that, has an MBA from Washington University's Olin School of Business, which she earned in 1994. Nina Leigh lives in St. Louis with her husband and her two dogs. She has 3 sons, and you're very involved in the community, serving on multiple boards and executive committees of various nonprofit organizations, including the St. Louis Children's Hospital. So welcome, Nina Leigh. It's so good to see you here again. Thank you. So tonight we're going to run the event as a Q&A. I'm going to lead the first portion for about 30 to 45 minutes, after which we'll take questions from the audience. We have a large audience and we'll be sure to leave plenty of time to address your questions. So Nina Leigh, the first question, the most important question perhaps, is why did you choose Miami University?
That is a great question. So when I was looking for colleges, I was not even aware Miami University existed. I had been looking at like Kentucky and Georgia and Notre Dame trying to play tennis. And then I was playing at a tournament and Leanne Davidge, who was the tennis coach at the time, scouted me and said, hey, I'd really like you to come to Miami. Just come visit the campus. And I have to say, from the moment I walked onto the campus, met the team, met some of the professors at the time, I absolutely loved it. And the rest was history. I didn't look anywhere else. I just applied there and that's why I chose it.
That's an easy decision. It's a beautiful campus. It really is. Hard not to fall in love with. So what did you love most about your time here at Miami?
So as you mentioned, it might have been a few years ago that I graduated. But really, I would say what I love most about Miami, obviously I had an outstanding education in the business school, the Farmer School of Business. What I would say that I remember most and love the most were the friendships that I've made and still have to this day. So playing tennis, I met and still have a lot of tennis friends. From a sorority perspective, my TBI friends are watching tonight, I do believe, my roommates from college, and then also from the business school. So I would say really that's what I loved most, were the friendships that I've made and kept throughout the years.
And looking back, is there anything you would have changed while you were here at Miami?
So it's funny you asked that question. I was asked that question when I interviewed my senior year by a bank. And I have to say, I told this answer to him as well. Not really. It was such a wonderful experience that I really couldn't find anything. I will tell you, I told him I didn't like to wait in line signing up for classes because that back then you had to do that. So that was probably the worst thing that I could say.
We're going to pass on that one. It's very good. Yeah. So you've got a really interesting story and background. So I'd love to know your journey, from when you graduated from Miami through to now President and CEO of Nestle Purina's business. I'd love to hear that story, please.
Sure. So I graduated in 1983, and for those of you familiar with that time, the economy wasn't really that great. So I had interned at Humana the summer before, and I went back and had an internship there. They wanted to hire me full time, but they couldn't. And so after working multiple jobs, my cousin drove me to Washington, D.C., where I got a job in finance. And while it was interesting and I liked numbers, it really wasn't, DC probably wasn't the place that I really wanted to live long term. Had a bunch of friends in Chicago, so I chose to move to Chicago, kept working in the finance industry. After a while, I realized that really my goal was to get back into brand management. That's really what I wanted to do. So I applied for MBA schools, got into Washington University and moved to St. Louis. While I was at WashU, I interned at Purina, and after graduation, I took the job and really never left. And I've had such a wonderful experience here with many, many different roles throughout the year. So the years that I've been here. I
love it. So what do you enjoy most about your current role?
Well, I would say the thing I enjoy most is really the subject matter. I love pets. So I have the ability to work in an area where I have a passion for. The second, I would say, and the real reason I changed from my internship to coming here full time was the culture. The culture at Purina is absolutely incredible. The environment is so collaborative and not competitive. It's a family. So St. Louis is a small town, but there's people from all over the US and globally here. And we're really guided by the foundation that our founder set years ago, which is really centered around being a good person, making really thoughtful decisions, taking pride in your work, and giving back. So the North Star at Purina is really doing the right thing for pets and people every single day. It's very simple. We don't make any trade-offs in that area. And then really on a day-to-day basis, I just love the challenges of problem solving and doing what I can to bring out the best in my team.
So many people, myself included, have gone and got a puppy, in this case, a puppy for us during COVID. So we're a COVID puppy family. He didn't do too well today, I'd have to say. He didn't do well at obedience class, my husband told me. So talk to me about how COVID has impacted the pet industry, both good and bad.
For sure. So we got a puppy during COVID too, so I can totally relate to that behavior challenge. But you're in good company. A lot of people adopted and fostered pets during this time, which is really a great thing. It's really helped people through this pandemic. The human-animal bond is such a powerful relationship and wonderful. So that's been really good. It's safe to say that COVID really has impacted every industry, so pets no different than that. Our business has remained strong, thankfully, and we saw more pet owners put their trust in Purina during this time, which has been very humbling, something that we certainly don't take for granted. For Purina specifically, the pandemic has had ebbs and flows of our consumers stocking up on our products. I know there's other consumer products that have had the exact same situation, so it's been really challenging for us at times. The pet care industry, though, is remaining strong to this day, and it's a great industry to be in.
I want to stay and focus in a little bit on the issue of inventory. You managed stocking up, and ask you some questions about the supply chain. So how challenging has it been to maintain inventory during COVID?
Very challenging. The realities of COVID have really had two really strong concerns for us here, and it's people and product in that order. As most of you can remember, and I just mentioned a minute ago, there was such a frenzy to stock up on foods and supplies that it had a huge impact. And if you stand in front of a shelf and you picture a bag of dog food and you say, okay, there's 8 ingredients in that dog food and a package. The 8 ingredients come from totally different places. The package comes from a different place. They all have to come on different forms of transportation. And every single one of those elements was impacted during COVID. So it's really, how do you orchestrate all of that coming together to get that product on the shelf? And that journey for us really starts with each of our associates at our 21 factories being able to safely and confidently come to work, trusting us and each other. And that cannot be underestimated. So our number one priority was really to create that safe environment, provide PPE to our associates, and take every precaution we needed to make sure that they had a safe environment. We also brought in meals from local restaurants for each of our shift workers, which would help the local economies, but also provide a place where the workers could have a meal and have some sort of normalcy, I will say, or stabilization in that day. You can imagine how instrumental communication was with our teams. That was a huge piece of it. Our suppliers and our transportation and logistics team. I'm just in awe still, because these challenges still exist today, of how we pulled it together and how we continue to do that today. And finally, but certainly not least, Nestle, who owns Purina, has been backing us up and supporting us this entire way, and they continue to invest in our business, which is extremely important for us to be successful.
I think it's certainly tested leadership, hasn't it, during these times when you're trying to maintain supply chain issues and inventory to customers. Just a couple of questions ago, you talked a little bit about fostering animals. And so one of the concerns I have, that so many people I hear of have gone and fostered or adopted animals from shelters and so forth. Are you concerned that the COVID pets might end up back in shelters once we're all back to normal?
You know what, that is a really great question. It was great to see all these pet lovers adopt and foster, and it's really been a rare opportunity for many households to bring home a new pet and be able to spend all that time with them. I also think, and we mentioned this before, that the love and the bond of the pets and the humans have helped so many people cope with this uncertainty in the last year. So those all have been wonderful positives. But one concern we do have is that, will pets be relinquished? And there could be, for a couple reasons, and I'll tell you what we're thinking about there. So our behaviorists are afraid that many of these pets that had their families home for almost a year are going to experience separation anxiety. And so that's really big. I mean, I know from our puppy that we got during the pandemic, as we start introducing more people to our household, she's not familiar with that, and she barks and has lots of behavior issues that we have to really work on to make sure that we can overcome. And then also, a lot of families are struggling financially, and we've been working with partners to really provide pet food pantries with food so that no family has to decide to give up their loved pet so much because they can't afford to feed her.
I think it sounds like the training industry is going to take off, I think, as people go back to work and deal with separation anxiety for our pets. So as a puppy owner and a fellow marketer, I've thought quite a lot about how we've been introduced to different pet foods and how our brand choices have formed and who's influenced those brand choices. So I'd be really interested to hear you talk about the customer journey, especially for first food for puppy or any pet, and how easy or perhaps difficult it is to get people to brand switch from one brand of pet food to another.
That's a really great question, because there certainly are a lot of choices out there. If you go to the shelf, there's just a ton of choices that you have. At Purina, really our foundation is nutrition, and it's all about science, and that's what the foundation of everything we do there. So our first job, or our most important job, is to make Purina the first choice, but if we can't do that, the next choice. So we work with shelters and responsible breeders across the country to provide foods to their pets, and also a bag of food for the consumers that are adopting that, so that the first bag the pet owner has is a Purina bag when they go home with their new pet. We also work very closely to educate veterinarians about the science that goes into our products. It's easy to see Purina and think about a bowl of food, but there's an enormous amount of science and expertise that goes into that. We have more than 500 scientists, vets, and behaviorists who work here on staff, so education is key, and the more that we can do that with the veterinarians for them to understand is really important. And ultimately, we have to make a compelling case to the pet owners on why Purina is the best food choice. We're lucky that we have a very broad portfolio of foods, and each of our foods offer excellent nutrition. So we invest in a lot of understanding consumers and try to make those deep consumer connections. We like to think of ourselves as being consumer obsessed.
So I want to stay with the topic of buying food for pets and ask you questions about inelasticity of demand. So I'm asking this question because we recently bought some peanut butter for our dog, and it was just purely peanuts in a jar. That's all it was, and yet the price was about 3 times what we would pay for normal peanut butter. So was my observation of perhaps inelastic demand with peanut butter or pet food a fair and accurate observation?
Yes, it is. The pet category is about $100 billion industry that continues to grow. And pet owners are invested in their pets as much as they are their family members. And we know that younger generations are delaying having kids and opting for pets first. So they have that disposable income that they want to spend that way. So it really provides companies like Purina the opportunity to innovate and have success in this category. We do a lot of work with entrepreneurs and startups to help mentor them as well, so that we can understand what's out there and how we can take advantage of innovation that they're seeing. So yes, there's an incredible demand that can lead to a lot of innovation, and it can even lead to very expensive doggy peanut butter.
If I run out, I might have to eat that one for myself. So I'm interested in the topic of brand influencers. Now, we have many students listening to this call tonight. They certainly would understand the concept of brand influencers, but I'm curious to know what that means in the pet food industry. Who are they? Who do you go to? Who influences our brand choice?
So that's a great question. I've mentioned a couple before. There's several that we really focus on. Veterinarians are definitely an authority on pet health, and we know that every consumer that or pet owner that gets a pet has to go to a veterinarian. So that's definitely a very important one. Pet welfare groups like shelters and rescues are often the first connector to pet owners as well. So it's really important for us to have connections there. Groups like the American Kennel Club that promote responsible and purposeful breeding can also be helpful. And we also are aware of a lot of other social and online influencers. We work with the human and pet influencers, as you can imagine, to really get their honest reviews and endorsements when it's an authentic fit. So we don't try to force fit any of those things. We look for those positive, natural, authentic relationships.
So I want to ask you about something that caught my attention literally a couple of days ago, the new reality show called Pooch Perfect, which I believe is being hosted by Rebel Wilson, who I quite like. I quite enjoy her comedy. And as I said, it just caught my attention. So can you tell me about reality shows like Pooch Perfect and, more importantly, Purina's relationship with that show?
So we occasionally do work with reality TV shows. We're really excited about this show. One of our amazing vets, Dr. Callie Harris, is a judge, and we're proud to be offering the grand prize for this reality show as well. Obviously, the safety of our dogs is our top priority, and ABC has been absolutely fantastic to work with this. And I believe it's premiering tonight on ABC.
I think you might be right. Certainly the ads that I've seen coming through look quite fascinating, so I must make sure I record it. So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the future of the pet food industry. So what do you see as some of the emerging trends post-COVID, not just because of COVID, but because of innovation in general that's happening in the industry?
For sure. So first one I'm going to say is one that is not going to come to a shock to anybody, and that's really direct-to-home products and services will continue to boom. I mean, we saw that during COVID, it was a necessity for people to purchase this way, and we're starting to see that necessity is paying off because people saw the convenience out there. We like to say that as we look to the future, that consumers are going to look for this frictionless shopping experience, and they're going to want their unique needs met when, where, and how they want it. So that's going to become even more important as we go into the future. Another trend that we're seeing is consumers are really demonstrating a renewed confidence in science as a foundational understanding for human and pet health. So that is really great for us because it's making our innovation that we have here at Purina even more relevant than it's ever been. And as I mentioned, we have so many scientists and behaviorists here on staff and nutritionists that can help us. So that actually plays right into our wheelhouse. And then there's also a continued and growing consumer desire to support and align with purpose-driven organizations, including PET. And this was a trend that was building before COVID, but it's been amplified as a need for businesses to step up and support their communities, and it's not going to go away. And sustainability fits into that as well.
So I want to shift gears and talk about your leadership, your role as a leader, and also think of some advice for our students. So first and foremost, you're a woman CEO. You lead a large organization, Purina, which sits within an even larger global organization, Nestle. So do you ever stop and think about what you've achieved, the fact that you are a woman CEO and president, and you're among a small but growing group of women who lead such organizations?
I do. And when I accepted this role, I was told that this was a huge responsibility on my shoulders and to try not to think about it too much. But so, of course, there's pressure and there's responsibility. However, I don't dwell on it from a female perspective. I dwell on it because I want to focus on being a really good leader, not because I'm a female leader. So I think that's really, really important. And I try not to focus too much on the female part of it. When I look at my career and I look at how I got here and why I got here, I've had a lot of mentors in life, both men and women, and I've mentored both men and women. I've had good sponsors, and it's because of their continuous support, their tough love, their feedback when I didn't necessarily even want it, that really has helped me get to where I am today. And I have the mantra that it's important to collaborate and not compete. And I especially mean that when you're working with women. I think a lot of times we look at it and say, there's only one or two of us in these roles. But really, the more we can band together and help bring us all up, the more successful women are going to be in the future.
Have you always gravitated toward leadership roles?
So that's a really interesting question, because I've always thought that leadership comes in kind of different shapes and sizes. I was extremely shy when I was a child, and I ended up taking on leadership roles, not because I understood them as being leadership roles, but because I found them to be very interesting or something that I wanted to do. So I think leadership roles can come in various different shapes and sizes. I would like to say there's also something I've learned throughout the years, that there's a lot about leadership that you can learn by not having the exact top leadership role. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of value in taking on supporting roles and getting more out of your skills and seeing how you can contribute as part of a team. So I don't think of it as I have to be president of an organization. I could lead a committee, and that could be just as important, and I could add just as much value in that way, and sometimes even more value, because I have an area of expertise that I can actually bring to the forefront.
I love it. So as you think about your career, and I know that you do spend quite a bit of time mentoring younger students, what qualities do you look for, and what do you encourage younger people to focus on?
That is such a great question. So first I'd like to say is be agile and open to new opportunities. Know the what, but remain agile on the how. So as I mentioned a minute ago, you don't have to lead all the time to be the leader. So think about that. Develop listening skills, because you need to be open to others' perspectives and listen to learn and not to respond. So really be in the moment and don't be thinking of what answer you're going to give, but seek to understand what's going on and what they're trying to communicate. And then learn to prioritize. It's really important to know that just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And you need to decide what's most important and what's going to add the value to the team or to the goal that you're trying to go after.
So I want to talk a little bit about DE&I, and I know that hiring and retaining diverse talent right now is top of mind for many of us. So speak to me about some of the initiatives you've got at Purina to do exactly that, to hire and retain diverse talent.
Sure, this is such an important topic today. So we're really approaching it from two different perspectives, and so we have to think about how do we ensure Purina is inclusive and a great place to work for all, and then how do we help make sure the industry is more progressive when it comes to equity. So it's really kind of a two-pronged approach. So Purina is evolving. I have to say we're not perfect, and it's important for me as a leader to understand that we do have room to improve, and in doing so, we'll make our culture and our business better, and we have to really reflect on that and decide how we want to move forward. An example of one of the things we started doing this summer or last summer was a series of listening sessions to learn about the experiences and the life and the work of our associates of color. And I had the opportunity to sit and listen on these, and wow, did I learn a lot. And it put a different perspective into the way I approach just everyday conversations, as well as my personal approach. And we also have to say, and it's something we've started to say a lot here, we have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I've really taken that to heart, because on this journey, you are going to be uncomfortable, and you need to still keep exploring and searching for those different areas. So we have an opportunity to help the next generation see themselves, especially people of color, as pet owners as well, and as veterinarians. We know that there's only 2% of veterinarians out there today that are of diverse candidates. So we are starting to create scholarships at various veterinarian universities to promote a more diverse field. So it's one step. We have to take many one steps to get where we can be.
I want to switch to giving back. One of the things I love about our students and our alumni is their willingness to make the world a better place, to contribute to society. When I prepared for this interview, I found out that you're doing quite a lot of work to support domestic violence. So I'd love it if you could share that work and why that work and some of your commitment to it. Thank you.
Sure. So Purina has been supporting domestic abuse survivors with pets for many years, and we formalized this effort a few years back, and we created a project called the Purple Lease Project. We started up in New York, and it was fantastic, but the goal was, how do we create a shelter in every state where abuse victims can bring their pets? And so our goal is to help more domestic violence shelters become pet friendly. And it's really important to do that because about half of the victims won't leave if their pets can't join them, because they know they will be harmed or even worse, killed. And only about 10% of shelters currently allow pets today. So this has become a real personal passion for me. I had the opportunity to go to the Hill in 2019 to meet with members of Congress and their staff to help push legislation forward that would provide more support at the federal level for this particular initiative. It was an incredible experience. I'd never done any like that before. Legislation passed, not because of me, but because of all of the people that went there to do that. And I just think it's so important. I think I mentioned at the very beginning, one of the reasons I loved working at Purina was because of our founder, and we are always a purpose-driven organization. That's a philosophy. So we do that. We do that, and we do it in many other ways too.
It's such important work. So moving on to work-life balance. So this is something our students often lean into. And I guess for the students right now, they're sort of crunching through the middle of semester and it's not a pretty time, I think. But speak to me about work-life balance for you. What does it mean? And how do you find some sort of work-life balance in your life?
So that's really a great question. And until I really came to the realization that I own my own work-life balance, which sounds sort of silly, but you always sit there and think, oh gosh, I've got to have this balance of what it is. And so it was important for me to realize that I was in charge of it. And once I realized I was in charge of it, I could take the responsibilities the way that I always do. I do believe that when I am at home and my children are there, which they're not so much anymore, but I needed to be fully present. So I often, raise my phone up to people and say, no one asked you to bring this to the soccer game. Nobody asked you to bring that to the dinner table. So I really found it was important to be fully present when I was home, and then be fully present when I was at work. I have a philosophy that's work hard, play hard. So you've got to do both. Sometimes that's easier said than done, but it's important. So it's a journey. It's an evolving journey.
If you weren't CEO, what would you be doing?
Oh my gosh. I would probably say teaching or coaching. It would be what I would love to do.
And what do you want to do next?
So this is such an interesting question, because my kids and I were just joking about this over the holidays. They swear I can't stop working because it's not in my DNA to sit still. So we'll see. But I would probably like to teach, and I'll throw it. Maybe Miami will have me back one day.
So for my last question before I hand the microphone to Megan is the finale is always career advice for our students, and I wonder if you can take it in a couple of parts. So as students are coming into Miami as freshmen and thinking about their career, and also once they leave and graduate and start moving into their first career, so if that helps, to split it down into two pieces would be great. Thank you.
Sure. So I always like to think of life like your career is a journey, not a destination. So by the nature of that, a destination is a straight line somewhere. A journey is a travel that goes back and forth. So it's good to have a plan, but you really need to be open to those unplanned opportunities that can stand before us today. And I always, when I was growing up and when I was in school, and even till 5 or 6 years ago, always envisioned my career as a ladder. That was always the visual that you gave you, and you would go up the rungs of the ladder. And I would challenge people to think of it differently today. I would envision your career like a rock climbing wall, not a ladder. So when you climb a rock, if you've ever done it or gone bouldering, you go up, you go sideways, sometimes you go down, and then you go up again. And I think that's just so important for people to understand and students to understand, is that journey is going to take you in a lot of different places. And sometimes that lateral move is going to teach you skills that you never thought that you needed, but you absolutely do need to succeed, and really be open to that journey.
That's such good advice. So now I'm going to pass the microphone to Megan, who's going to transition us to questions from our audience. So Megan.
All right, thank you. First question, we'll go back to Miami. You told us why Miami, what you loved, and if you would change anything. But how did your Miami experience shape your career?
So I would say a lot of my Miami experience revolved around tennis. Took a lot of my time. And tennis taught me a lot about leadership, which we've talked about a little bit before. It taught me about teamwork. It taught me a lot about preparation and prioritization. So when you're playing tennis, you've got to have a strategy. You have to think about where you want to go, and you have to get prepared for it. And then you also, at the same time, need to think about the impact that a shot will have. So you need to go to the next space. So a lot of that was incorporated into where I am today and how I think today. Friendships, as I mentioned before, I was incredibly shy, and the gift of meeting such great people and having the ability to do that in a safe environment. And I would also say the professors and my experience in business school. So Miami, and I was talking to some professors about this a couple years ago when I came back, Miami started experiential learning before experiential was a word and a thing, and it was the way to go. And I think that helped a lot because you had some hands-on experiences that really made it important. And a lot of the professors actually had real work experience, and not all of them. And then you need to have the research. I learned a lot about research as well, but I think that also sets you up to understand, hey, we're teaching you this process this way. Know that when you get into the real world, it's going to be different. And I think all of those set a really good foundation for me.
All right, thank you. How has Purina been able to effectively combat all the new brands and startups that pet food has seen in recent years?
That's a great question. That's a challenging question. I don't know who's asking these. The pet care category is growing for sure, and there's definitely room for competition. And we love to have competition because we learn a lot, especially the smaller companies who teach us about how to be more agile and how to do different ways of bringing things to market. We put consumers at the center of everything we do. So I think that helps separate us. That, coupled with, as I mentioned, our 500 scientists, nutritionists, and behaviorists, is a foundation that we have that a lot of startups don't have, so we can take advantage of that. So we're rooted in science, and that's not going to change. And as I mentioned, the trends are leaning more towards science today. And so we know that can be a key differentiator for us in the marketplace. We have also this great program that we call the PetCare Innovation Program that brings together entrepreneurs and startups. And so not only do we offer to mentor them, but we also find that just allowing an open forum for them to network and share with us is really instrumental in their development. And quite frankly, we get just as much out of it. So we learn just as much from them. And we do invest in some of those. So I think that all of those together are kind of what make a difference.
Okay. Is marketing in the pet food industry different from other industries? And if so, how?
Not really. So I would say that the biggest difference for marketing in pet food is probably similar to baby, and that the end consumer can't talk to you. So you have to look for cues and clues. We have obviously ways that you can figure out if they like a food or not through different types of research, marketing research. So it's really learning about the consumer, the pet owner, and talking to the pet owner and understanding their attitudes and behaviors. So it's similar to a lot of other marketing of brands and packaged goods.
Okay. And these are going to be all over the place as they come in. What is the best career advice you've ever received?
The best career advice I've ever received was probably what I said to you earlier. So I was at a point in my career where I needed to make a decision as to did I want to continue to go in a marketing track, or did I want to go into more general business? And there's nothing wrong with either of those decisions, but I had to sit down and really look internally to say, what's driving me? What do I get the most, where do I have the most passion? And so basically it was follow your heart, follow your gut as to where you want to go. And what that meant was I had to take a lateral position. So I couldn't go up in a trajectory that I would have probably had in marketing straight through. So my mentor at the time said, hey, take that lateral move. It's going to work for you. You're going to learn those skills that you need, and then you'll see yourself propel up in the organization. And that's exactly what happened.
Who would you say has been the biggest influence on who you are as a leader, and how has it changed you?
So I would say two. I'd say the first is my father. He had an enormous impact on me growing up. He was an amazing person and really taught me some of the core values that I've talked about today. And then the other would be Eleanor Roosevelt. She was an unbelievable leader that I started reading about in high school. And it was all about, she was very open to learning other people's points of view. She knew it was important to listen and be present and to incorporate those points of view in the way that she moved forward. She knew that it was important to be part of a movement, and you could do that. So you needed to have a passion, you needed to get behind it, and you needed to move those desires forward, whatever they might be. And something that I learned recently, which fits very much into who I am today, is she loved to exercise every day, which I didn't even know. I was reading an article a few months ago on her. So she's been an incredible person. She was a woman. She was fighting for women before it was even a thing to do. And she had her husband put women in cabinet roles. So it just was really important, and she played a big role.
Staying on a female-focused question, what advice do you have for young business women who are raising a family and pursuing a high-level career?
Wow. Hang in there. It's hard. I know it's hard. And it's especially hard when you have young kids. So the first thing I would say is talk to your partner. Have those tough conversations when you need to do that, so that you're on the same page. And I feel for women who don't feel supported at home. I am so lucky to have had I still have a great husband, who's always supported me and my ambitions. And we couldn't have done that if we didn't have really candid conversations about what roles each of us would play. And we truly tried to complement each other. And really think about your true priorities and focus on them. You know, it's easy to really get caught up in wanting to be everything to everyone, and you can't do it. You just can't do it. So if your priority is family first and your job, make sure how you spend your time and energy reflects that, and it's okay. Turn down the opportunities that aren't right. I once had someone call me. I was offered a role, and it was a really challenging role, and it was somebody that I worked for years before that had retired from the company, and he called me and said, "Do not take that job. They do not value you and your role as a mother, and you can have both." And it was so interesting for him to say that. He said, "I believe in you, and I will sponsor you and help you, and you need to think that through. So think about what your priorities are and where you want to go, and it'll work out."
That's great. Thank you. This comes from a fellow Miami alum and a current Purina employee.
Uh-oh.
What advice do you have for current students and Purina employees in order to have a long, successful corporate career?
Well, so to have a long career, I would say that first off, you need to work hard, and you really need to learn from others. You need to be open to feedback. You need to be receptive to it. You need to take it in and process it, and work on those areas that you need to. You need to be your own advocate. You need to ask for the opportunities that don't exist today and figure out how you can add value. Stay curious, because quite frankly, that's extremely important. And I would say you need to count your results, but results are not just KPIs, they're in relationships that you get along the way, and you will not be successful if you don't have those relationships.
Thank you. How has technology created new opportunities for Purina and the pet care industry?
Wow. You must have been in some of the meetings that I was in today. So we're just trying to figure that out right now. So technology has really helped our consumers understand so much better what we offer. What we're trying to really do now is understand how we can do customization and personalization, how we can have those much more targeted conversations, and really how can we influence and help consumers have that proactive health journey for their pets so that they can live long, happier lives together. And technology has really started to help us do that. we know that, every consumer and every pet is unique, and we have to acknowledge that and appreciate it. So quite frankly, we're just starting this journey. It's not an easy journey to have. As we mentioned, pets they're the end consumer, but they can't actually talk to us via technology. So stay tuned for that. We've got quite a few lofty plans in place to see how we can conquer that.
Okay. Next question. How important is a master's degree in the business world? Is it worth it, or an MBA, to be successful at a CPG company?
So that's actually a really interesting question. When I was entering the CPG world, which is one of the reasons I went back to graduate school, was the only way you could get into marketing was with an MBA. And I would say now, first off, before you even consider going back to get a master's, work 3 to 5 years at a minimum. So get some basic understanding, learn the business. And quite frankly, now with digital being so important and the way we go to market is so different, if you can get a job in a field that helps you get that exposure, you don't need a master's. We need people with experience just as much. So a master's is good, but it's not the end all be all. And I would say we hire at least a 50-50 ratio of people that way. We also bring people in now from different areas of our organization who have just great experience that they can bring into marketing or into these other areas and move them up through the organization. So not as much as it used to be.
Earlier, you mentioned what Purina was doing during COVID, giving shift workers meals from local restaurants and whatnot. Have you seen an increase in employee morale and productivity from doing that?
Absolutely. So one of the things that if you read a lot of articles out there today, you'll hear that a lot of, especially factories, are having a hard time getting employees to show up and to be there. And we've had absolutely zero of that problem. And I think it's because from day one, we put their health and their family's health at the forefront of everything that we do. And it was important, and we communicated that, and we made sure that they understood that. And I believe through that and all the communications that we've done, I think employees recognize that we trust and value them, and that is what's most important. So we've not, I'm going to knock on wood right this minute, not seen that as other people have potentially.
What differentiates your company from your competitors? And if someone in business is interested in working in a company focused on animals, what suggestions do you have for them?
So I think I've touched on a little bit of this, but one of the first things I would say is our culture. It's second to none. So I would say that it's a culture built on collaboration and not competition. And I think that's just so important. Understanding the consumer and being truly consumer obsessed is at the core of everything we do. And I think that sets us apart. We are absolutely a pet-friendly company. Normally, we have about 100 pets on campus any given day. I ran into a puppy mastiff the other day that was huge, and I was kind of having a tough morning and a little bit grouchy, I have to say. And by the time I finished petting, the dog's name was Tug, so tugging Tug's ear, I guess. I had a great smile on my face, and so we really have the ability. We bring pets to work every day. We give back, and we have teams dedicating to making a positive community impact, not just in St. Louis and nationally as well. And I think that sets us apart as well. And I think last but certainly not least, we have a family first mindset, which means being flexible. So even before COVID happened, I could coach basketball teams and baseball teams. I could stay home if I needed to for refrigerator delivery. So we had that flexibility. And I think that's really important. Difference. We'll continue having that flexibility in the future. So I think that's important. What would people do? I would say volunteer with animals, walk dogs, pet cats, figure out if that's really your passion. It's a passion for, I would say, everybody that works here. Get a pet if you can. Of course, that's a little selfish for me. Adopt it if you can. And look for ways to use your skills or passions to help pets. I mean, many of our scientists started out in the human health industry, but they love their pets. And so that applied knowledge is extremely powerful.
Okay. I was smirking earlier because we got a question. Does a human taste the pet food? That's a marketing type question. And then also, do you use noises that would appeal to a dog in a commercial?
So humans do not have to taste our food. We do not do that here at all. Absolutely not. We test our dog food we test our food with dogs. And as far as sounds to appeal to pets or dogs or cats, we don't typically do that in our commercials. I mean, there's naturally some, like if you shake a package for a cat, they'll come running, but they'll come running anyway. We do that more to signal to an owner that, hey, you can do that, and the cats will come running, but we don't do that. We avoid doorbells in commercials so they don't annoy pet owners. Like, you look for those types of things, but we don't try to single out noises or sounds that way.
Okay. This next one's a little lengthy. What do the acquisitions of brands such as Zooks, Merrick, and most recently Lily's Kitchen allow Purina to do that they may have previously been unable to see through? What have you learned from these companies after acquiring them?
So really, it extended our consumer reach. So when we talk about being consumer obsessed, and we have a breadth of brands that do that, as new trends come into the market, whether it's more humanization or looking like real food or different types of things like that, those positionings and those products offer to consumers benefits that our current portfolio didn't offer. So it's great from that perspective, and we learned so much by acquiring these companies. We can, we try to create the products we can in-house, but when we can't, I mean, agility. Talk about how do they bring products fast to market. They don't do the same type of testing that we do. And you know what? Sometimes we don't need to do the testing that we think we need to do. They do a lot more grassroots marketing, and we can learn a lot from those types of things. So really, there's a breadth of knowledge that we learn from them and apply not only to those brands, but across our portfolio where applicable.
Okay. Just a reminder to our students, if you're here watching for a class assignment or class credit, you can go ahead and start submitting your class information via the Ask a Question button. Instead of asking a question, you can just include your class and professor's name. The next question is, you've mentioned you have a culture of collaboration at Purina. How do you foster that kind of environment at such a large company?
So that's a great question. And one of the things I would say is that COVID has made that more of a challenge. And I think anybody who is working today can understand that. But we have a very much an open door policy. So we encourage people to ask questions, to stop by with a cup of coffee. It's important from a top-down perspective that we're all accessible. So we want honesty from everybody. So we ask that, and we have a saying that we say, fail forward. And we really encourage that so that there's little risk to taking risks. I have a philosophy that if you have a seat at the table, you have an obligation to have a voice. So we try to have that in all of our meetings and in all of our collaboration rooms and things like that. So I believe that's one of there are many ways that we do it. I really look forward to getting back in person, because I think it's so much more helpful when you can just walk down the hall or go on a different floor. I'll go on floors all the time and just talk to people. And that's when you really can get great feedback and great information.
What do you have for our students who are studying business but haven't decided quite yet what to study?
I think that's totally fine. It's funny. I ended up I always thought I wanted to do marketing, and I ended up in marketing. I would say that if there's an area in business that you have a passion for, study it. If you find that you just like general business, that's okay too. And then when you get your first job, you're going to start to understand what you like most, what parts of business that really excite you and that you have a passion for. And internships are so valuable to help you find where those areas are and find a direction. So that's what I would say.
Okay. How does Purina integrate different business processes to create an innovative environment?
Wow. We have lots of ways to do that, and each of the different groups do their own. So in marketing, our CMO has what they call a dime time. And so every Friday, you basically can spend 10 minutes and they serve up ideas, and you spend 10 minutes just talking about how you might solve that problem. So That's one way that we do it. We have the innovation prize that I mentioned before, that we have different companies come in and talk about. We try to really encourage collaboration and integration across the organization. We've done some employee science fair style internal competitions, so you can bring your ideas to market, and then we bring them down in what we call skylines, but just a big conference room, and you set up your tables and you try to sell them, and we vote on it. It's actually really a lot of fun. You see a lot of ideas that you may not have seen, and it gives them a chance to bring them to life. And this is once again where you talked about collaboration. Relationships are key to all of this, and that's so important.
What are the best things that an intern can do, and what makes a successful intern?
So I would say the best things for an intern to do are to be, when we have interns here at Purina, one of the things I really love is we actually give them real projects. So commit to learning, not just doing. So we really want you to do that. So you should really enter the job wanting to understand the business instead of simply performing the tasks that are asked of you. And this means doing your homework even to land the internship and to really understand more about what the organization's goals could be and how you can contribute. And then add value to the conversation. You have something to offer, and you're more dialed into your generation than any others at the organization that you're interning with. So use it to your advantage by sharing your perspective and show your curiosity and show your energy and your enthusiasm.
I don't know who asked this this next question, but I've heard you have a fondness for Katharine Hepburn and the way she has approached life and business. Can you share a little more about that?
I can do that for sure. And I actually know where that question came from. Thank you, Aunt Sharon. So when I moved to DC, I mentioned that I was really shy, and I had interviewed for many, many, many jobs, and I just couldn't get a job. And my aunt, I was living with her at the time, and she asked me, she said, I don't understand what your problem is. You were a great tennis player. You had these leadership roles in college, and what is it? And I said, well, I just can't talk about myself. It's not something I like to do. And so she asked me who my favorite actress was at the time. And it was Katharine Hepburn, and it's still Katharine Hepburn. And so we talked about that for a minute, and she said, okay, your next interview, I want you to do your homework and your strategy like you would, like when you're playing a tennis match. Understand, the playing field, know the job that you're going to do, how you're going to do a good job with it, what are your strengths and weaknesses. I want you to channel Katharine Hepburn when you go in. You're not Nina Leigh Howard, you're Katharine Hepburn. And lo and behold, got my next job. So I still think of Katharine, and I still think of my Aunt Sharon all the time.
Great. Going back to tennis, how did you balance tennis and Greek life at Miami? And are you glad you did both? I think this is a good question for our first years and any future students who could watch this back.
That's a really great question. It started first with commitment. So growing up, if you made a commitment, you had to follow through. So quite frankly, I didn't think there was another choice when I did tennis, and I absolutely loved it. But prioritization, like I mentioned before, was key. Leanne always said, schoolwork is number one, tennis is number two, and social life is number three. And you can do all three, and you can do all three very successfully, but you have to understand where they rank and the prioritization around them. And so it was something that I did. You have to make trade-offs. You have to make choices. You can't do everything that you want to do. Student athletes have two jobs. They have the job, which is to go to school, and it's tough. And then you have the job of being an athlete. So that's important. And I had a lot of fun in college. I can't say that that's not true. So you can do it all, but you really have to prioritize what you're doing.
Okay. What traits do you have that allowed you to move from an employee to an executive?
First and foremost, I think it's because I love to learn. And I talk a lot about loving to learn and having that curiosity. I get bored easily, so I want to continually figure out what I can do and what's next. I love to read. I also really love coaching and teaching others. And I think that's really important as you move from an employee to an executive. That actually becomes almost the majority of your role as you go there. And I think the biggest factor, though, is probably the support of others. You know, my family, I've mentioned that before, but also mentors and sponsors throughout my career. You know, you have to be willing to ask for advice and help, and then you have to be willing to listen to it. And I think those two are really important as well.
Okay, I have one final question from one of your biggest fans, most likely. How did you raise such amazing children?
Yeah, I think I know which one that is too. So, great question. A lot of patience, a lot of tough love. I would say good DNA. I'm blessed to have 2 boys by birth and 1 by luck. And I have to say an occasional glass of wine or bourbon didn't hurt either.
All right, this has been wonderful. Jenny, I'll turn it back over to you.
It has been wonderful. I've just been sitting here listening at the breadth of questions that we've had from the audience. It's been quite stunning. So as we close, I want to sincerely thank you so much, Nina Leigh. It's been a pleasure to work with you this evening. And thank you for the gift of your time, your willingness to share insights, and to provide so much richness to our students and all those who are listening. So thank you very, very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been a ton of fun. It's been a ton of fun.